Okay. Well, let's get started. I'm sorry I was sick last week, but uh, first of all, I'd like to see if there were any questions on last week's topic with Fritz Perls and Gestalt. What did you think of Perls? Little different than Rogers? Yeah. All right. Well, um, so yeah, I think the only thing I have to do now is catch up on some discussion boards and we should be good. It is hard to believe we're already in week 7 of the semester. And so by the end of this week, we'll be halfway through the semester. And yeah, so that'll be good. So I think before we do the lecture on the theory, I think everybody's probably wondering what the exam is like. And so I think I'll go over the exam first. It's already posted in D2L. And I'm going to pull that up for students at home. So we have week 7, and week 7 looks like a normal week. It's got the notes, a lecture, the class I'm recording now. It's got a PowerPoint. It does have films on demand, which is kind of an overview of choice theory. It's not what I would prefer because it's not a counseling session with William Glasser. But you can find some on your own on YouTube if you just type in William Glasser counseling session or reality therapy or choice theory. There'll be some examples, but it's really just an overview with a lot of interviews and things like that. So it's not ideal. I don't have access through our library to any of his therapeutic videos. But we'll go over everything you need. You just won't have that. And then I did post 2 student videos that for tonight. We'll see how much time we have, but they're both online. It's student video and student video 2, and you can watch those. There is no discussion board for this week, so don't think you're missing that. There's no discussion board because you'll be taking your exam, and that'll be enough work for you. The Dropbox is under week 7 at the bottom, along with the description of the entire exam. And what I thought I would do is I'll read the exam with you and explain each part of the exam and kind of what's expected. But then we'll go over each theory and see how you might answer some of those questions, or see if you have any questions about each theory. And we'll go over reality therapy choice theory tonight, and then you could ask at the end of the lecture, we'll talk about applying the exam to that theory. But I can definitely give you some insights into things that you should include for each theory and things you may not want to include. So, all right. So, let's look at the exam itself. I tried to go into as much detail as possible, but I'll give you some other explanations with it. So it says, please submit exam 2 to this Dropbox, which is at the end of week 7 at the bottom, with all of the questions together in one Word file. So you're going to write your answers to the exam in a Word document, and you're just going to have, you're not going to have 3 Word documents for 3 questions, just one Word document, and you'll have question 1, question 2, question 3. You'll have 1 week to complete this exam, and it's due before next class. I don't care if it's a minute before, that's fine. But we are going to go over the answers in class. So I'd like you to have it completed before I give you all the answers. Try to have this in, since you have an entire week, since it's open book, open notes, open lectures. Try not to ask for an extension. That's one reason I'd rather have a comprehensive answer, and have you able to apply the various theories to a case than just giving you an exam in class where you just memorize facts and don't really apply that knowledge. So I think this is a much better way to do it. So you'll have a week. You can email me with any questions. You can ask me questions tonight. But have it in any time before next class. It says, because you've got an adequate time to complete this, please don't ask for extensions unless it's an absolute emergency. Begin working on it early. This is not an exam that you could work on the night before. You can't do that. This is going to take you some time to complete. A lot of students work on maybe 1 question a day. So that way you're focused on one theory and its application at a time. So it will take a long time to complete. And these are not short answer questions. So the minimum is about a page typed per question. Most students write more than that, but it's really a minimum of a page, and not 3/4 of a page. And each question has 3 parts, so 3 paragraphs per question. Okay, so this exam is an application of your theoretical knowledge to one case. So you've got one case, and all 3 questions are applied, all 3 theories are applied to the same case. Next exam, you'll have the same case. It's always the same case. The reason for that is I want you to see that no matter what's going on with a client, you can apply each theory to that case and have some success with that client. So you've got 3 questions, 3 theoretical approaches. So the client's name is Sam, and it's written in the exam. We'll look at it. There are 3 questions or essays to the exam. Please don't copy the case and put it in your answer. Just copy the question. Question 1, question 2, question 3. I don't need to have the case in your answer. The problem is if you copy the case study in your answer, we have something called Turnitin, which looks for plagiarism, and it will count the case as part of your plagiarized document. So it'll give you a really high Turnitin score. So don't copy the case into your document. We're looking at putting everything in your own words. So below a 5% Turnitin rate, I would rather see you write your answer in your own words than to quote Corey or somebody like that. In fact, please don't quote Corey. Let's see. Here's some things to think about as you write your answers. How would you use each of the three theories to help this client if you were that specific therapist? So if you were Carl Rogers, how would you use person-centered theory to help this client? If you were Fritz Perls, how would you use this theory? If you were William Glasser, how would you use reality therapy and choice theory? So imagine yourself in that scenario. Each theory should be recognizable for each question. If I didn't read the question, I only read your answer, I should be able to immediately guess, oh, they're writing about Gestalt. They're writing about person-centered. I should know that. This is not an exam reviewing the theories themselves. So as an undergrad, you would be tested on the theories. This is graduate school. I'm assuming you know the theories, and you're being tested on the application of those theories to a case. Okay, so you're not going to say in-person centered theory, we use the techniques of reflection, clarification, paraphrase, summarization, etc., comparing incongruencies. You know, you're not going to do that. You're not explaining the theory to me. You're applying it to the case. So everything you write about is in regard to the case. So each case essay should have 3 parts, each in its own paragraph. So 3 sections to each answer. So the first section looks at the past. You're going to discuss the case applying theoretical concepts, terminology, and a developmental outlook, if that's included. Use examples applied to the client. So give me examples from the client's case. Each theory looks at the case differently, so you can't repeat things. This section is about case history and what brought the client to counseling, what brought the client to this point in their lives. This is the only time you're going to talk about their past. Like, there's a lot of talk about the mom and the dad in Sam's case, but you're only going to talk about the mom and the dad in part 1, in the case history. The mom and the dad are not in therapy with you, okay? So use theoretical terminology, use concepts from the theory, and talk about the client's past. This is what's going on with the client. This is what brought them to this point in their lives. This is why they need to come to therapy. This is why Sam's here. So you're going to analyze the case history using the theory. Okay, that's the only time you're going to talk about the past. The only time you're going to talk about the mom. The only time you're going to talk about the dad. Because the second part is a discussion of the therapeutic session. And this should be the longest part. The second part, part 2 of your answer is you're going to talk about what happens in a session with the client. So that's in the present. we've talked about the past. Mom and dad aren't in the session. You're only going to talk about Sam with Sam in the session. This is the hardest part for students to do because they so want to talk about Sam's past in the therapy. There's a place and time for that, but not in this exam. Keep things in the present with Sam. What's going on with Sam now in his life? It's not what went on with Sam in the past. What's going on with Sam now? So we want you to use at least 2 techniques from the theory, but don't just jump into the techniques. There's a lot to each theory beyond the techniques. So you're going to talk to Sam. You may talk about things like, reflection of feelings. How is Sam feeling now? You may talk about layers of the personality. You may talk about current choices that they're making, needs that aren't being met, depending on which theory you're using. You're going to do all of that before you use a technique. After you do that, you say, okay, so this is where you're at right now. I have a technique, or as Pearls would say, an experiment that I'd like to use with you if you're willing. Let's try it. And as you apply the technique, you can provide a dialogue, or you could give a very descriptive account of how you use that technique with the client. What was the client's response? Was awareness a result of the technique? What was the client newly aware of? What awareness was facilitated by the technique? Now, I usually told you this in the lectures, but some theories have what I would call in-depth techniques, and sometimes they have what I call minor techniques. So an example of a minor technique in Gestalt would be I statements, or being present with the client, or active listening in Rogerian. All of those are minor techniques. I'm going to assume that you use them because you could only write a couple sentences about them. So pick in-depth techniques like role plays, reflection of feeling and finding a deeper feeling, talking about, choices that didn't get people where they want to be, and what new choices can be made, WDEP, and play that out. So use in-depth techniques. Don't just take the easy way out and use a minor technique that only takes a couple sentences. I'll just send it back and say, please use a major technique. So let's see. And then describe the session using appropriate terminology after you use the techniques. So wrap up the session. What happened in the session? That's part 2. It all takes place in the present. Part 3. This also has to be different for each question, for each theory. So part 3 takes place in the future. What are you going to do in the next 8 weeks of counseling? What's your treatment plan going to look like? What parts of the theory are you going to use that you haven't used so far? So a lot of times the mistake students make, or they say, well, I'm going to use some resistances to contact, and I'm going to explore a couple other layers of the personality, and I'm going to use these techniques. Well, you can't just tell me a list You have to tell me how you're going to use them. How are you going to use these with Sam? What are you going to explore in Sam's life? What type of growth in Sam do you anticipate through the use of these techniques, experiments, whatever? So you can't just make a list of what you're going to do. You have to explain how you're going to do it with the client. What are you going to explore with the client? Where would you like to go with the client? What are some of the goals you'd like to meet with the client? So this focuses on the future 8 weeks in the session. Please don't say, I'm going to explore the role of an abusive father. Why not? Because that's in the past. We're going to do something new with the client. What are some new choices that the client might want to make? What are some changes the client might want to pursue? He might want to explore a new relationship. He might want to explore a new interest. He might want to explore a new job or career. He might want to go back to school. All right. Those are the 3 parts to each answer. And I don't think they'll be that bad. A paragraph for each one, and at least. So let's just look at the rest, and then you can ask questions. And then we're going to look at the theories and talk about how you might apply these things. So the case study's generic, but you should have enough general information for a case study in a session. Please only use the primary theory that the question requests. So for instance, you're only going to use Rogerian theory, person-centered. You're not going to use his daughter's expressive arts theory. You're not going to use any other theory that Corey mentions. You're only going to use person-centered. Same thing with Gestalt, same thing with reality therapy. So you're focused on just one theory. Even if Corey talked about other theories that are related, just one theory. Each answer should be a page, but it can be longer if needed. There's no maximum. Please submit your exam in a Word document to Dropbox for exam 2. Remember, there is no exam 1. This semester, I removed that. You can use your book. You can use your notes. You can use PowerPoints that I supplied. You can rewatch all my lectures. Refer to my lectures if you want. Use any supplemental material I gave you in your notes. Do not use the internet. There's enough in having an open book, open notes, lectures, everything else that you can refer to. Use your own words, except when you're using a theoretical term. So don't quote the book. Use your own words. Put it in your own words. You can use terminology. All right. So before we look at the case of Sam, any questions about the format of the exam? All right, let's read the case of Sam. Yeah.
New idea going to effect, or is it kind of straightforward applying the theories in place?
So the question is, new ideas or sticking with the theory? So you can use the theory creatively, but you must stick to the theory. But you can use person-centered in a creative way. All right. So Sam, I modeled these case studies after Corey's book on case studies. And of course, it's called The Case of Stan. So I came up with Sam. These are unique. They're not a copy of Corey's case. But I thought that was a nice way to go about it. I edited one of his case books, and I really liked it. So I thought it was a good way to apply theory and to learn about theory. So Sam is a 30-year-old male. He is physically healthy. He entered therapy with presenting problems that include minor anxiety, sadness, self-doubt, loneliness, and a lack of personal meaning or purpose. He grew up as the middle child of 2 siblings. He was small for his age and was often teased by the other children in school. He had a close relationship with his mother. While his parents were together, they maintained what he considered old-fashioned roles. He was not sure what a modern relationship should be like, but he hoped more equal. Culture played an important part of his early family experience, but it also caused some arguments between his parents. His father was from Italy and was extremely traditional and conservative in gender roles. His mother was a mixture of cultural backgrounds and had grown up in a diverse neighborhood. She was quite progressive and independent. He did not talk about his parents' arguments outside of the house. In order to avoid any arguments, his mother would often bring the father a drink immediately after work. No one would bother the father until he had time to relax. Sam saw his role as a peacekeeper. His father left the family when he was 8 years old. The parents divorced. He had a sporadic relationship with his father after he left. He held some pent-up emotions toward his father even until now. He always thought he had to change to be accepted by his father. During his teenage years, he began to experience some anxiety. He also had stomach aches and headaches. He desired a dating relationship, but had difficulty connecting. He began to fear rejection and often doubted himself. He felt that no one would like him. He loved music, reading, and visiting the Museum of Natural History, especially the dinosaur exhibits. As he became an adult, he often felt sad and lonely. He still desired a relationship, held a variety of jobs, but none gave him fulfillment. He wanted to go to some higher education program, but was afraid of failure. At 30, he looked in the mirror and decided that he wanted a positive change. He decided to come to therapy because he believed that life should have more meaning. He also wanted a healthy family of his own someday. You may add some details to this case if needed, but the basics should be here. You should have enough details. All right, that's the case. So here's some things the case study does not mention. It doesn't mention his gender identity or what type of relationship he might want to have. Doesn't matter. You can pick whatever you want. It doesn't say exactly what types of jobs he had, but most likely he wanted to please his father in getting a job, and but he never pursued his true loves, especially paleontology. And so he always wanted a relationship, but he was never able to pursue one for whatever reasons, probably the fear of failure or rejection. All right, so let's talk about Rogers and you can chime in your thoughts. So Rogers, you're definitely going to remember genuineness and congruence, accurate empathic understanding, unconditional positive regard and acceptance are all qualities that a counselor possesses, but they are not techniques. Okay, there are some techniques that are included in the book, like active listening and being present. Those I would consider minor techniques. So use the techniques of reflection of feeling, paraphrasing, clarification, pointing out incongruencies, especially, maybe summarization. Those are the techniques. So there's your answer for the techniques. But there's a lot of other things that have to do with person-centered theory. So in the very first section of your answer, you're going to talk about his relationship with his mom and dad and what growing up might have been like. Maybe he was bullied, he felt misunderstood. He had an unhealthy example of what a relationship should be like. He did not feel as though he was accepted unconditionally for who he was and loved. So, and there's a lot more to it than that, but that's kind of the basics. And so that's kind of the past. That's section 1. In therapy, you're going to make sure that he does feel heard, accepted unconditionally. You're going to use that list of techniques that I just gave you to have a dialogue with him to promote some more self-awareness, pointing out incongruencies such as he doesn't currently find meaning in his jobs now, but perhaps pursuing something that he enjoys might provide more meaning. In the third part, what are you going to do in the future? Well, since you talked about academics and career and finding some meaning, and you might want to pursue a relationship and talking about relationships in the next sessions. And how would you go about doing that? What techniques would you use? What qualities would you demonstrate? Would you use the counseling session as a model for a positive professional relationship where he is accepted for who he truly is and he's not judged? So, okay, what else would you all like to throw in or ask about for Rogers? You can ask me anything you want. Now's your chance. I'll give you the answers. All right, well, you can think about that, but let's talk about Gestalt and Fritz Perls. So the main thing, and I wrote this down, is that even though you're pretending to be Fritz Perls and using Gestalt theory, you don't have to be rude or sarcastic. You can be a kind therapist and still use Gestalt theory, okay? So you don't have to be, you don't have to use sarcasm or mimic or anything like that. But some of the interesting things, you're still going to have the 3 parts to your answer. So how would Perls examine the case history, the past? Well, at some point in his past, he got stuck and he decided that he could no longer present his true self. because he might be rejected. So he experienced an impasse of being stuck. He experienced a fear that he would be rejected, most likely by his father. And so he became a bit phony. He was wearing a mask. He was living a life that he did not find meaningful. And he couldn't disclose or live an authentic person, authentic self. So you're kind of going to analyze everything that goes into the makeup of that negative side of his personality and the layers of his personality, what happened in his past to get him to this point. And then in the second part, in the therapy session, you're going to help him to become aware of these layers of the personality through experiments in the present. So using I statements and being present and things like that are minor techniques. I would probably use things like role plays, top dog, underdog, things like that, a role reversal, to help him understand that he's being phony because he's afraid of being rejected and he's stuck living an inauthentic life and he wants to move towards being himself, taking a chance, being happy and meaningful, finding purpose in life. So the big mistake that students make in this section is they bring up the father, but the father's not there. They say, oh, let's do a role play, pretend I'm your father, bring out all your anger, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't do anything but allow the client to vent. So it's not going to solve any problems. Instead, and remember, the dad's no longer here, the dad's not in session. So instead, I would have the client have a dialogue in a role play between the two parts of his personality, the one wearing the mask and the other one that's authentic. And they can talk with one another. He's really talking with himself. And so, that would reveal the mask that he's wearing, the phoniness of who he is showing to the world. And it may help him decide who the authentic self is and help to encourage him to move towards that authentic person, to break through the impasse and move forward in a more energized layer of his personality. And so then there's probably two places that he's not being authentic. One is he doesn't find work meaningful, and the other, he isn't in a relationship. And so, I think that in the third part, you can talk about how is he going to move toward finding authenticity in those two areas of his life. And you may want to include things like resistances to contact and how that's inhibiting relationships, things like that. Fears that he's going to need to overcome. Not only wanting to be authentic, but believing that he deserves to be accepted for who he is. And if he's not, then why care? If somebody doesn't accept me for who I am, I don't care. I accept myself for who I am. So not feeling that need for external validation, but believing we deserve to be loved and accepted for who we are. So you notice there's a theme. It's just that we're addressing these themes in different ways using different theories. All right, Any questions about Gestalt? Are you getting the hang of the way this is going to go? Yeah.
In context with therapy, not necessarily the exam itself, would there be a time and place to have them talk about the father?
So there would be. I'm just trying to delineate the different parts for this exam to make it a little more clear. But for instance, in Gestalt, the only way to address the father would be to talk about, to use an experiment, and to talk about how the father is indirectly affecting them right now in their lives, even if the father's dead. You know, my parents are gone, they still affect me today in some way in my present life. So we would bring it into the present. We would talk about how's that parental relationship playing out in your life now? What else? Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit just because all this will be on one recording. We're still going to go over a lecture on Glasser and reality therapy and choice theory in the next recording tonight, but I think it'll be better if I go over Glasser and choice theory for the exam altogether. So let me talk a little bit about that now. It'll make more sense after I go through the theory lecture. But so William Glasser has a good friend named Wobelding, and I spent a lot of time with both of them at various conferences, and my professor was Wobelding's student. So Wobelding gave me the supplements that are in your notes for WDEP. So one of the things that Wobelding found lacking in Glasser's choice theory or reality therapy was organization of the process. So instead of a lot of little techniques, the techniques you're going to use, this is the answer for the techniques, is WDEP. You're going to walk the client through the WDEP process in the session. So part one, you can talk about, the client's past, but you're going to talk about it in terms of what needs are being fulfilled and what needs aren't, and what choices are they making based on their upbringing, and those choices are not working for them or getting them these needs. They aren't being met. So, of course, there's 5 basic needs. We'll go over them all, but 2 things that aren't being met are meaning in a career and a relationship. So, and the client keeps making choices, but they aren't getting him where he should be. They're not getting him to a place where he's finding meaning or finding a relationship. And of course, Glasser believes that at the root of most psychological issues is the lack of either a relationship or the lack of a satisfying relationship. So you can kind of get into how his upbringing got him to make these unhealthy choices. And that brings him to today. And then in the session, you can process the unmet needs. You can, in the present, you can process Okay, so maybe these are two things you'd like to work on that aren't being met. You know, you've got no relationship, but you'd like a healthy relationship, and process some of the choices that he's making that are not leading him to a healthy relationship. So, for example, in the first part, his parents did not model a healthy relationship. And yet he saw a lot of unhealthy things like an unequal distribution of power in the parents' relationships, mom being more progressive, father wanting to be more traditional, and that clash between that inequality. And the choices that his parents made led to divorce. So he hasn't really had a positive example. So we can talk about positive choices that he could change. So if all the choices that aren't working aren't getting him what he wants, he's got to make some new choices that will change the direction of his life and get him to a more positive place where his needs will be met. You can do the same thing for a career. So after you talk about basically needs that aren't being met, the choices that aren't getting him where he needs to be, the choices that he needs to make, then I would probably talk about WDEP. That's going to be your technique. So they're not going to be real specific techniques, but each letter can be used as a different technique. So you're going to use all four, WDEP. We're going to talk those through in the lecture today. There's also a handout that's kind of the official WDEP handout, and you can just look at that while you're taking the test and follow along and apply that to Sam. And then in the future, part of the WDEP process is evaluating whether the new choices are working or not, and then fine-tuning them so that, you know, the next 8 sessions, he's going to try some of these things out, and then he's going to come back and you're going to process, well, how'd it go? And you're going to evaluate what's working and what's not working and fine-tune these choices, maybe add new ones, maybe make changes, maybe get rid of some of them if they're not working. And eventually, over the next 8 weeks, now he might not end up with a perfect relationship in 8 weeks, but he's going to learn how to have a healthier relationship. He might not end up with the perfect job in 8 weeks, but he might go back to school for paleontology and feel as though he's working towards a positive goal that will provide his life with a little more meaning and get some of those more basic needs met. All right. So, and you can ask me more questions after the lecture portion, but any questions in general about how to apply this theory to Sam? All right. Well, it is about 7 till 5. Let's come back, and at about, 5 after, that's about 12 or 13 minutes, and then we'll have our lecture on William Glasser.